The quiet of the early morning was broken by an unexpected sound, a cat's plaintive meow cutting through the crisp, cool air. The fire station, a typically bustling place, was eerily silent at this hour, with only the soft hum of the streetlights. Outside, firefighter Ethan had just finished his overnight shift and was sitting at the station's kitchen table, nursing a steaming cup of coffee. His eyes were heavy with sleep, but the persistent meowing outside caught his attention. At first he thought it was just a stray cat wandering the streets, but the sound grew louder and more urgent, echoing against the brick walls of the station. Ethan set his mug down and walked to the front door, curious about the commotion. He squinted into the dim light of dawn and saw a small, scruffy cat sitting just outside the station's garage door. Its grey fur was matted, and its green eyes glinted in the faint light. The cat's tiny body shivered as it let out another desperate cry, this one louder than before. Ethan opened the door slowly, expecting the cat to bolt, but instead it stood its ground, staring up at him with an intensity that sent a shiver down his spine. There was something different about this cat, something almost purposeful. "What's the matter, little one?" Ethan muttered, crouching down to get a better look. The cat meowed again, this time turning its head toward the side of the station, as if it wanted him to follow. "Ethan, you talking to yourself out there?" A groggy voice called from behind him. It was Mia, one of his fellow firefighters, rubbing her eyes as she walked into the garage. Ethan waved her over. "Check this out," he said, pointing to the cat. "It's like it's trying to tell me something." Mia frowned, crossing her arms. "It's just a stray, Ethan. Leave it alone. It'll wander off eventually." But as she spoke, the cat took a few steps toward the alley beside the station, then paused to look back at them, meowing insistently. Ethan stood up, a strange unease settling in his chest. "I don't think it's going anywhere," he said. "It wants us to follow it." Mia sighed, but curiosity got the better of her. The two firefighters exchanged a glance before grabbing their flashlights and stepping into the cool morning air. The cat trotted ahead of them, leading them down the narrow alley, its small paws splashing through puddles left by the night's rain. Ethan felt his heartbeat quicken as they ventured deeper into the alley, the beam of his flashlight cutting through the shadows. "What do you think we're going to find?" Mia whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of their footsteps. "Don't know," Ethan replied, his eyes fixed on the cat as it stopped in front of an old dumpster. It turned to them and let out a final piercing meow, its eyes wide with urgency. Ethan's flashlight swept over the dumpster, and what he saw next made him freeze. "What is that?" Mia asked, her voice trembling. Ethan didn't answer. His breath caught in his throat as he stared at the dark shape, just visible behind the dumpster. Whatever it wasn't moving, and it didn't look like trash. Before they could process what they were seeing, the cat jumped onto the edge of the dumpster, its meow echoing one last time like a plea for help. Ethan stepped closer, the hair on the back of his neck standing on end. Something told him this was no ordinary morning. "Should we call for backup?" Mia whispered, her hand hovering over her radio. Ethan shook his head, his voice steady but tense. "Not yet. Let's see what we're dealing with first." As the first rays of sunlight crept over the horizon, the mystery began to unfold, and neither of them could have prepared for what they were about to discover. Ethan and Mia stood frozen for a moment, their flashlights trained on the shadowy figure behind the dumpster. The cat hopped down and circled the area, its tail flicking as if urging them to move closer. Ethan took a cautious step forward, his boots splashing in a puddle. Mia stayed a step behind him, her fingers gripping her flashlight like a lifeline. As Ethan approached, the faint outline of a blanket came into view. It was dirty and damp, haphazardly crumpled against the dumpster. But then he noticed something. That sent a chill racing down his spine, a small hand poking out from beneath the fabric. "Oh my God," Mia gasped, her voice trembling. She stepped forward, her flashlight shaking in her hand. "Is that—" Ethan dropped to his knees and gently pulled back the corner of the blanket. Lying there, barely breathing, was a young boy no older than 4. His face was pale, his cheeks hollow and his clothes soaked through from the rain. The boy's lips were tinged blue and his tiny body shivered uncontrollably. "He's alive," Ethan said, relief flooding his voice. "But barely. We need to get him inside." Mia quickly radioed for medical assistance while Ethan carefully scooped the boy into his arms. The cat meowed loudly and trotted beside them as they hurried back to the fire station. Once inside, they laid the boy on a cot in the break room and wrapped him in a thick, warm blanket. Ethan knelt beside him, gently rubbing his hands to restore circulation. "Where did he come from?" Mia asked, her voice a mix of shock and concern. Ethan shook his head, his gaze fixed on the boy's fragile frame. "I don't know, but we need to find out. Who leaves a child out in the cold like that?" The boy stirred slightly, his eyelids fluttering open. His gaze darted around the room, filled with fear and confusion. Ethan leaned closer, speaking in a soft, reassuring tone. "Hey there, buddy. You're safe now. Can you tell us your name?" The boy opened his mouth, but no sound came out. His eyes welled up with tears, and he clung tightly to the blanket. The cat jumped onto the edge of the cot, curling up beside him. The boy reached out a trembling hand to pet it, and for the first time a hint of calm washed over his face. Mia crouched beside Ethan. "He might be in shock. We need to get him to the hospital." Just then, the paramedics arrived, rushing into the break room with their equipment. As they checked the boy's vitals and prepared to transport him, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this story. The cat, still perched on the cot, let out a soft meow as if echoing his thoughts. After the ambulance left, Ethan and Mia stood in the garage, the weight of the morning's events pressing down on them. The cat sat by the door, watching them intently. "This doesn't feel random," Ethan said, running a hand through his hair. "The way the cat led us to him, it's like it knew," Mia nodded. "I've heard stories about animals sensing danger, but it's like the cat was waiting for us." The two firefighters decided to follow their instincts. They returned to the alley, hoping to find clues that might explain how the boy ended up there. The cat followed them, weaving between their legs as they retraced their steps. At the dumpster, Ethan noticed faint footprints in the mud, one set belonging to a child and another much larger. The larger footprints led away from the scene, disappearing into the darkness of the alley. Mia snapped photos with her phone, documenting the evidence. "Someone left him here," Mia said, her voice tight with anger. "But why?" Ethan's jaw clenched. "And who? We need to figure this out." The cat suddenly darted ahead, its tail held high as it headed toward a cluster of abandoned buildings at the end of the alley. Ethan and Mia exchanged a glance before following it. The air grew colder as they approached the buildings, the smell of damp wood and decay filling their nostrils. The cat stopped in front of a door hanging off its hinges, meowing loudly. Ethan pushed the door open, the creak echoing through the empty structure. Inside, the walls were covered in graffiti and broken glass littered the floor. But what caught their attention was a small pile of belongings in the corner. A worn-out backpack, a tattered stuffed animal, and a pair of tiny shoes. "This must have been where he was staying," Ethan said, kneeling to examine the items. "But he wasn't alone. Someone else was here with him." Mia picked up the backpack and unzipped it, revealing a few cans of food, a water bottle, and a crumpled piece of paper. She smoothed it out and read the messy handwriting aloud. "I'm sorry, I can't take care of him anymore. Please help him." Her voice cracked as she finished reading, and she looked at Ethan with tears in her eyes. "Whoever left him must have been desperate." Ethan's fists clenched. "Desperate or not, abandoning a child like that is unforgivable. We need to get this to the police." The cat meowed again, drawing their attention to a broken window. Ethan approached it and looked out, spotting a narrow trail leading deeper into the woods behind the building. He turned to Mia. "What if whoever left him is still out there?" Mia hesitated. "Do you think we should follow it?" Ethan nodded. "If there's even a chance we can find them, we have to try." The trail was faint, barely visible under the fallen leaves, but the cat led the way with unwavering determination. Ethan and Mia followed closely, their flashlights cutting through the dense underbrush. The woods were eerily quiet, the only sounds their footsteps and the occasional rustle of leaves. After what felt like an eternity, they emerged into a small clearing. In the center was a makeshift campsite, a tattered tent, a smoldering fire, pit and a few scattered belongings. Ethan's heart raced as he scanned the area, searching for any sign of life. "Hello?" he called out, his voice echoing in the stillness. "Is anyone here?" There was no response, but the cat trotted over to the tent, pawing at the flap. Ethan cautiously pulled it open, revealing a worn sleeping bag and a few personal items. A wallet, a photo, and a handwritten journal. The photo showed a woman in her 20s, holding the young boy they had found earlier. She looked tired but happy, her eyes filled with love. Mia picked up the journal and flipped through its pages. The entries painted a heartbreaking picture of a mother struggling to survive, doing everything she could to protect her son, despite the odds stacked against her. She must have left him at the fire station, hoping someone would find him, Mia said softly. Ethan's throat tightened. But where is she now? Before they could ponder further, a branch snapped behind them. They turned quickly, their flashlights illuminating the figure of a woman standing at the edge of the clearing. Her face was gaunt, her clothes tattered, and her eyes filled with a mix of fear and desperation. "Please," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "don't take him away from me." The woman stood frozen at the edge of the clearing, her body tense like a deer caught in headlights. Ethan and Mia exchanged a glance, both sensing the fragile state she was in. The cat, now seated calmly near the woman's feet, looked up at her and let out a soft, encouraging meow. Ethan took a cautious step forward, lowering his voice to a gentle tone. "We're not here to hurt you. We're firefighters. We just want to help." The woman's shoulders sagged slightly, her exhaustion evident. Her hollow cheeks and sunken eyes told a story of struggle, one that needed no words. She clutched her arms tightly around herself, as though trying to shield herself from the world. I didn't mean to abandon him," she said, her voice trembling. I thought it was the only way to save him." Mia stepped closer, careful not to spook her. "Your son is safe. We found him, and he's being taken care of at the hospital. He's going to be okay." At the mention of her son, the woman let out a strangled sob. Her knees buckled, and she collapsed to the ground, burying her face in her hands. "I didn't know what else to do," she cried. "We've been living on the streets for months. I tried to find work, but no one would hire me. He was getting sick, and I couldn't give him what he needed. I thought if I left him at the fire station, someone better could take care of him." Ethan knelt beside her, his heart aching at her words. "You did what you thought was best, but you don't have to go through this alone anymore. We can help you." The woman looked up at him, her tear-streaked face filled with doubt. "Help? Meow, I have nothing, no home, no money, nothing." "You have something," Ethan said softly. "You have him, and that's worth everything. We'll get you both the help you need. Shelter, food, a chance to start over." Mia nodded, her eyes glistening with emotion. "There are resources for families like yours. We can make some calls and get you connected to the right people. But you have to trust us." The woman hesitated, her gaze shifting between Ethan, Mia, and the cat, which was now rubbing against her leg. Finally, she nodded. "Okay, I'll trust you." As they walked back through the woods, the woman shared her story in broken fragments. Her name was Lisa, and she had once been a nurse. But after losing her job during a wave of hospital layoffs, things had spiraled out of control. Medical bills, rent, and the cost of raising a child on her own had become too much to bear. "I never wanted it to get this bad," she said quietly. "But once you fall, it's so hard to climb back up." Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "You're climbing now, that's what matters." When they reached the fire station, Lisa froze at the sight of the bright lights and the paramedics' ambulance parked outside. Her fear of being judged was written all over her face. Ethan leaned in and whispered, "You're not alone anymore. Remember that." Inside, the medics informed Lisa that her son was stable and receiving treatment for hypothermia. The relief on her face was palpable, her tears flowing freely as they led her to see him. The moment she stepped into the room and saw her son's small, fragile body wrapped in warm blankets, her knees buckled again. This time Ethan caught her before she fell. She rushed to his side, cradling his tiny hand in hers. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'll never leave you again." The boy's eyes fluttered open, and when he saw his mother, a weak smile spread across his face. "Mommy," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Lisa broke down, kissing his forehead and holding him close. Ethan and Mia watched from the doorway. their own emotions threatening to spill over. Even the cat had followed them in, curling, up on the chair next to the boy's bed as if standing guard. Later that evening, after ensuring that Lisa and her son were connected to social services, Ethan and Mia sat in the quiet of the fire station's kitchen. The cat lay sprawled on the floor, purring softly. "I can't believe how much that little guy went through," Mia said, stirring her coffee absently. "And his mum, she was just trying to protect him." Ethan nodded. "It's a reminder that we never know what people are going through. Sometimes all they need is a little help to turn things around." The cat let out a contented meow as if agreeing with him. Ethan chuckled and reached down to scratch behind its ears. "And as for you, you little hero, you knew exactly what needed to be done." Mia grinned. "Think we should keep him? He seems to have adopted us." Ethan looked at the cat, then back at Mia. "I think he's already made that decision." The cat purred louder, its tail swishing happily. The sun was just beginning to rise over the fire station, casting a warm golden glow across the building. Inside, the atmosphere felt lighter than it had in days. Lisa sat on the couch in the station's lounge, her son nestled in her lap, fast asleep. She stroked his hair gently, her face reflecting a mix of exhaustion and relief. Ethan walked in, holding 2 cups of coffee. He handed one to Lisa and sat across from her. "How's he doing?" he asked softly. Lisa looked down at her son and smiled. "Better. They said his condition is stable and he'll recover fully. I can't thank you enough for everything you've done." "You don't need to thank us," Ethan replied. "We're just glad you both are safe." The cat, now a permanent resident at the station, hopped up onto the couch and curled up beside Lisa. She chuckled softly. "And this little one, I owe him everything. If he hadn't brought you to us..." Ethan nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It's amazing how animals seem to sense things we can't. That cat knew you needed help and he didn't stop until he got it." Mia entered the room, her phone in hand. "Good news," she said, smiling. "The shelter has a spot for you and your son. They're ready whenever you are, and I spoke to a local organization. They'll help you find work and get back on." "Your feet," Lisa's eyes filled with tears. "I don't know how to repay you." "You don't have to," Mia said warmly. "Just take care of yourself and that little boy of yours. That's all that matters." Lisa hugged her son tightly, a quiet determination settling in her eyes. "I will. I won't let him down again." As the morning light grew stronger, Lisa and her son prepared to leave for the shelter. Ethan, Mia, and the rest of the firefighters gathered outside to see them off. The boy, now wearing a fresh set of clothes donated by the crew, clung to his mother's hand, but smiled shyly at the group. The cat sat proudly on the station's steps, watching them with its tail swishing. Just as Lisa and her son climbed into the waiting car, the boy turned and waved. "Bye, Kitty," he called out, his voice filled with gratitude. The car drove off and the firefighters stood in silence for a moment. Ethan broke it with a chuckle. Well, that was a first. A stray cat bringing a family back together. Mia smiled and crossed her arms. "Maybe we should put him on payroll." The cat let out a loud, satisfied meow, as if endorsing the idea. Ethan bent down to scratch its head. "You've earned your place here, buddy. Welcome to the team." As the day began in earnest, the fire station returned to its usual routine, but something felt different. There was a renewed sense of purpose, a reminder that their job wasn't just about putting out fires, it was about saving lives, in every sense of the word. The cat, now named Lucky by unanimous vote, stretched out on the station steps, basking in the sunlight, and for the first time in a long while, everything felt right.